The Forge of Music. "Yuval, cease that infernal noise!" Lemech bellowed in the tool-filled smithy. "My apologies, father," Yuval responded meekly. "The spirit of music possessed me again." "Nonsense," retorted Lemech. "Are you a man, or are you an animal that cannot control itself? Your constant banging is driving me mad," he continued angrily. "Besides, it will ruin our tools and is a distraction from our work." "Yes, sir," Yuval mumbled, looking down as he examined the molding he was setting. They were preparing for the production of cooking pots. Lemech eagerly returned his attention to the molten copper in his furnace, making sure the color reached a precise reddish hue. Lemech had the broad build and darkened skin of a master blacksmith, and could practically manufacture metal by instinct. Nevertheless, he still needed to inspect the coloring. The specific hue of red signified the ideal moment for pouring the flowing metal into the mold. Suddenly, Lemech heard a tapping sound with an unfamiliar rhythm, and he realized the source of the disturbing noise. His blood began to boil. He could not believe his son would continue banging after receiving such strong admonition. Through clenched teeth, Lemech turned to Yuval and whispered in a deadly tone, "By the Cursed One, your disruptions are becoming unforgivable." Lemech then started to pour the copper from the furnace into the mold, but it was too late. The copper had passed the right color. Lemech's anger became explosive. "Fool of a son!" he roared. "You have cost us good metal and an entire day of work. You are good for nothing," he continued, his anger overcoming his senses. He menacingly raised the molding with the liquid metal still in it. "You add nothing but distress and troubles." Yuval stepped back from his father's threatening moves and grabbed a nearby pan to afford himself some protection. Lemech tripped, and the molding with its red-hot contents went flying towards Yuval. Yuval instinctively raised the pan to cover his face from the molten copper. The copper fell on his shoulders and chest, immediately combusting his clothing. However, part of the copper bounced off Yuval's pan right into Lemech's face. Primal screams erupted from Lemech's workshop. Lemech's eyes had not been burned completely, but enough so that he could barely see shadows. It took several weeks before Lemech, now the blind blacksmith, would enter his forge again. Yuval had recovered quickly from his superficial burns and had dedicated himself exclusively to the blacksmithing. There were already rumors going about that Yuval's creations were even better than Lemech's renowned work. It was reported that Yuval had also started producing many more wooden tools, and wasn't predominantly focused on metal, as Lemech had been. However, there were also rumors that Yuval was creating tools that no man had ever made before, and that apparently served no purpose. Lemech's youngest son, Yuval Kahen, became his eyes. Over the course of a few weeks at home, they had developed a rapport. With minimal guidance by Yuval Kahen, Lemech could move around and function again. The big test, however, would come in the smithy. As Lemech approached the workshop, he already knew something was wrong. Sounds that were not natural to metalworking were emanating from the forge. Not the sound of the roaring furnace, nor that of a hammer on an anvil, nor even the sound of delicate metalwork. It was a sound unlike any Lemech had ever heard, and it was not produced by man. It had the rhythm of clapping, or even whistling, or song, but it was not man-made. It sounded as if it were made by a tool. Lemech, in hand with Yuval Kahen, rushed to the smithy. "Yuval!" Lemech asked in a mixture of anger and confusion. "What is that sound?" "What sound, father?" Yuval asked, taken aback by his father's sudden intrusion. "That sound I just heard." "Nothing, father. Just the wind rattling some of the hanging tools." "Do not play the fool with me, son. I ought to kill you for your insolence." "You tried that already, father," Yuval said quietly, with both fear and resentment in his voice, "and it did not turn out so well for you." Lemech was about to charge towards the sound of Yuval's voice, but froze mid-stride. After a moment's pause, he said, "My intention was never to hurt you," Lemech explained haltingly. "My temper got the best of me, and the rest was an unfortunate accident. Yuval remained silent. Lemech breathed out, breaking the silence. Let us move on, then. Show me what you have been working on. Yuval placed a new pot in Lemech's hands. Lemech touched, caressed, and weighed the pot in his thick hands, as a jeweler would examine a diamond. Give me one of my old pots, Lemech requested. Lemech repeated the procedure. After having inspected all of the new items with silent admiration, Lemech inquired, Is there anything else you have been working on? Like what? Yuval answered defensively. Enough, Yuval! Stop playing games with me! Just show me what you have! Out of instinctive obedience, Yuval handed him an instrument. Lemech inspected the instrument with his hands for a long time before speaking. He perceived a wooden frame covered with plated bronze on the edges. Lemech counted with his seeing fingers 10 strings drawn across the frame. The combination of wood, metal, and string was one he had never dreamed of, let alone understood. What is it? I call it a lyre. It plays music. Lemech started to laugh from surprise. It was a deep, rumbling laugh that radiated from his torso. No, truly. Yuval, what does this contraption do? Father, the instrument you are holding, when touched a certain way, makes musical notes that cannot be copied by man. When played in certain sequences, it can be quite beautiful. Show me. Yuval took the instrument back and ran his fingers across the strings. At first he played a soothing melody, followed by a dramatic piece full of anger, love, and passion. He ended with a light, wistful score that spoke of dreams unfulfilled. Lemech was dumbstruck. For several moments he did not move at all. Then big, salty tears streamed down his scarred face. He started crying. He sat his large bulk down on the smithy floor and began to sob uncontrollably. After a few minutes, he composed himself. He raised his towering figure up again, facing Yuval. Yuval, he said with a voice no one had ever heard before. Yes, father, replied Yuval in apprehension. What you have created is magical. I was a blind and arrogant fool not to appreciate your musical inclination before. I am sorry as well, father, for being the cause of your physical blindness. Do not be. I am finally able to see clearly. My wounds are self-inflicted, but that is enough time spent on remorse. We have work to do. Yes, father. What would you like to do? Why, we have lots of pots and pans and hammers and hoes and spears and arrowheads and many more things to make. Yuval was crestfallen at the verdict. He died a small death, but walked back to the furnace with resignation. But Lemech continued, And I would also like you to show me how you make those clever musical instruments of yours.